The following video contains sensitive content which some viewers may find offensive or disturbing. I suppose I want to know more about that DUI and about your drug use. In this exclusive sneak peek of my podcast, you'll learn the dark past of Vishuddha Das.
Actually, it wasn't the first time I driven drunk because I was in that, bulletproof teenage mentality of I'm fine, I'm okay.
And I learn about realities that are unseen by the human eye. So in that new reality, what's there? Is there trees and food and things like that, or?
The experience itself is bar none one of the most interesting things you can experience without the use of drugs or any kind of inebriant to change your reality, right?
You've tuned in to Why Believe, the world's most controversial podcast on religion and belief, with TikToker and researcher Kael ODonnell, the Aussie thinker.
When I was 16 and 17, I had two of my good friends, killed less than a year apart. So imagine, your best friends, people you see all the time at school and run around with outside of school. One was shot to death and one was stabbed and killed. And this is in a city where, violent crimes like that do not happen. It's a very, like I said, conservative area, clean kind of town, so to speak, very middle class. So that thing was totally out of left field. And then it happened again. And so I ended up in a position, long story short, where because of my inability to cope with it, I ended up with a relationship and then personally utilizing Xanax or barbiturates. And anybody who's done them knows how addicting they are, right? They give you this kind of drowsy, okay feeling. Everything's warm and all right, and that pain is gone and that anxiety is gone. And I just started using it consistently, constantly. And of course, going to parties and so forth, I started using, lots of marijuana, drinking all the time. So I was just, at that point in my life, after that year or so, I was just in this complete idiotic mentality of I'm invincible and I can do whatever drugs I want as often as I want and nothing's ever going to go wrong. It was when I got in my crash, it wasn't the first time I'd driven drunk because I was in that, bulletproof teenage mentality of I'm fine, I'm okay. But I wasn't okay. I was hiding it all through that kind of drug use and through those compounds.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really interesting. So I know that the drug use had a lot of negative connotations to them and they caused a lot of harm in lives and you saw the impact that it had on people's lives. I'm interested to know, I suppose, from your perspective now, it being a tool for spirituality. What you talk a lot about in your movies, in your YouTube videos about psychedelics and the way that they have on the brain. How do you view them now? Are they a tool to get into the spiritual world?
So I had done mushrooms and LSD when I was younger, in that phase. But to me at that time, that's what I saw them as, just kind of another drug or something I could trip on to have an interesting experience. But there was no depth or intention to it or anything. There wasn't any emotional resonance to it. It changed things a little bit, and I've made a video on LSD as well. It was a powerful trip, but it wasn't enough to really resonate with me. And once it was done with, it was like that chapter was closed, and I continue with my toxic ways. So after all these years sober, when I started traveling last January, I told myself that I was going to open back up to those experiences. If I am in a certain place and people have these compounds, I'm going to work with them. But I didn't actively seek them out. And actually, like we were talking about beforehand, I got to Australia and I was there in the springtime when all these mushrooms were just growing everywhere, bountifully, thousands of them. And I was on this kind of Hindu farm. It was an eco village, but they had a temple there for Lord Krishna. And for me, it was like, okay, one of the first places I go and really settle down for a bit to like live out in the woods. And of course, these woods are full of mushrooms. This must be kind of Krishna's test for me to, go ahead and heal these, because before I used them in high school, the last time I had a really bad trip and I got into this kind of, anti-psychedelic state. Even when I was sober, I was kind of in this mentality of, you don't need them, don't worry about it, no point to go try them. And so it's because I hadn't healed that kind of trauma with the mushrooms. And so when I was in Australia, I spent about a month doing them every other day almost. Some days small doses, some days much larger doses. And I wouldn't really tell the people around me. I mean, a lot of people there were doing it, but it was more so just for my own healing, going about my regular day. And doing so really helped me open back up and heal those traumas and realize how I can grow with these compounds and how they definitely can help people. But a big thing I always tell people, when they ask me, should I use psychedelics or shouldn't I, is that's for you to decide. I'm never going to be somebody who goes, you should do LSD, or you should do magic mushrooms, or you should do DMT. I think those kind of decisions are ones we have to make ourselves, right? Just like you wouldn't want somebody saying, if you randomly ask somebody on Instagram, should I move across the country? And they say yes, doing that isn't really a well thought out thing. Maybe you'll regret it. Maybe you'll get halfway there and realize you didn't actually want to do it. It has to be an internal choice that you make. So the same thing with psychedelics. I tell people, if you're interested in it and if you're committed to it and if you really feel you can grow from it and you have an intention behind using it, by all means go for it. But don't just go on someone's profile and ask them, even if they're a teacher, whether or not you should do something. It's got to be a decision you make for yourself. And in that regard, especially from learning from them over time, I've really begun to internally see them. It's almost like drugs at this point need separate categories, right? Because we have very harmful ones that you can die from and overdose on. And then you have ones like MDMA and psilocybin and LSD, which have very low toxicities, which are used now in therapy for healing PTSD and different diseases. So I think, the Reagan era, at least the American Reagan era campaign of, anti-drugs in all form has created that negative connotation that we're just now starting to break out of and realize that you can't logically see alcohol as equivalent to, a mushroom. They have very different effects, very different purposes, and they do very different things to the body. One more so destructive and the other one more so, I think, improvement-wise. And that's why they're such powerful tools for spiritual growth, is they open up our mind and our thoughts to a space where we can finally start to ask questions maybe we had never even thought about asking prior to using them.
Wow. That's a really interesting perspective as well, and some great advice as well to people who are looking to do substances for spiritual reasons, for healing reasons, things like that. Why is astral projection so fun?
Oh my gosh. I'm actually writing a book on lucid dreaming right now, so it should be out soon. And I've been practicing again for the first time in years. But I think it's fun and it's beautiful because it's literally like accessing a new reality, a different dimension, the astral dimension or the lucid dimension. And it's a beautiful thing because until we experience it, it honestly sounds ridiculous. It doesn't sound real. It doesn't sound possible. It sounds like fantasy nonsense. But then once you do have that experience, it totally blows the lid off of what you view as real, what can be real. And that was a big transition in my life when I was younger, is when I had my first lucid dream. It was the first time, because usually I have a more philosophical but scientifically grounded mind. And if I can't prove things or understand it scientifically, I have a hard time accepting it. And that was the first experience where I realized coming back from it that science can't explain this, that I can't take anybody where I just was to test it, but I did experience it. And so it was a very overwhelming and beautiful experience. And I think that's what a lot of people have when they have their first astral projection or lucid dream, is they realize, holy shit, I just entered a new reality. How is this possible? And it opens up your mind far more than many things can.
So in that new reality, what's there? Is there trees and food and things like that? Or
have you seen the movie Jumper?
No. What's the link to that?
So it reminded, at least my experiences, because everyone's experience is different in the realms. The realms are kind of created based on either what you want or what you're subconsciously thinking, kind of how dreams are too. Yeah, you're kind of entering into these spaces and you don't really know what to expect. It can be different every single time. But yeah, they do have landscapes and all these crazy things and entities and stuff. But I always compare it to Jumper, because Jumper is this movie from about 10 years ago. And this guy essentially has the ability, whenever he looks at a picture of something or has an image of a place in his mind, he can instantly teleport there. And so if he looks at a picture of, say, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, he can go there right away. And then he's in Italy looking at the tower. Or if he sees the Himalayas, in a picture, he can go there. Or if he visualizes San Francisco, he can go there instantly. And so I think of the lucid realm and the astral realm too, once you get better at it, is you can kind of build this frame before you even lay down a dream of what you want that landscape to be. And when you end up going lucid or having a projection, you enter those spaces more often than not. So it's kind of like you're creating that space for yourself. But the first times, it's honestly just like a mystery box. You have no idea what to expect or what you're going to see at all.
So is this imagination, or is there really something that is controlling it, or we can create worlds for ourselves?
That's the thing, is I don't have the answers to that. And for me, it's not even about answering it. For me, it's more interesting just to experience it. Could it possibly be a wholly different dimension of consciousness than the human experience right now? Possibly. Could it also just be a kind of different mode of neural circuitry that happens versus dreaming, and yet it's not anything majorly different? That's possible too. But I honestly don't know. The thing with me is that either way, the experience itself is bar none one of the most interesting things you can experience without the use of drugs or any kind of inebriant to change your reality, right? Humans for tens of thousands of years have been utilizing psychedelics and different compounds to alter their state of reality. We always feel like we rely on an external object to help us alter our state. So when you actually alter it for yourself, by yourself, without any external factors, it's a really, really revolutionary and new experience. It's unlike any other experience I've really had before or since.
In my next podcast sneak peek, I meet an ex-Christian musician, now cult leader. Because before, you put your hands on your head and you said, I'm downloading, I'm getting information.
I'm interacting with a spirit with personality. I think, schizophrenic people being people who are often plagued by demons, which we all have, I have.